Welcome everyone to our panel. I think we'll probably get this started in a very similar way as the first panel, because I think we have three new companies, we have three new types of data teams. Everyone's at a different part of their journey. So I'll just open it up. And Natalie, I'll start with you, right? Tell me a little bit about you and your data team, but we also want to know where's HelloFresh right now on their data governance journey. You and I had a conversation last week talking about your background and coming in from a much different type of governance organization. And so I think it'd just be great for the audience to learn a little bit about what you and your team are doing.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Austin, and thanks for having me. So I joined HelloFresh 2.5 years, and I'm currently leading the data management and data governance function. Prior to that, I was in investment banking for 12 years. So like you said, very different industry, with very similar data problems. So when I joined HelloFresh, we already kind of had a data strategy design, but it was more about how do we make sure that we roll this out to the entire organization and different data teams, right? So one of the main questions that we often get is, as a data engineer, what does that mean to have a data strategy in place? As a data analyst, what does that mean? So we definitely came a long way in the last 2.5 years, where we didn't have data policies, we didn't necessarily have data quality standards, roles and responsibility as what does it mean to be a data producer, a data consumer. So we have all of those things in place now, but definitely there's still a journey to go. But yeah, this is where we are at the moment.
Appreciate that, Natalie. We're going to double click on a lot of what you just mentioned a little bit later on in the discussion. Joe, I'll move on to you, right? DigiKey, very different type of organization, different stage of the journey. I know your team is growing. So tell us a little bit about, where are you at within DigiKey? What is the perception of data governance? Just give us a quick overview.
Yeah, so I'm Joe Sarteski. I've been at DigiKey now for a little over a year. And yeah, like Austin had said too, when I first started DigiKey, data governance was a term. They had started 5 years ago. They had done a little bit of the framework and then never really got back to it. So they brought me in to work on the governance team. Right now, we are at the very beginning of the process. We have a roadmap that includes all like the pillars of like data quality, stewardship, and those types of things. Right now, we're trying to build that out. Right now, we are pretty much focused on building out our data catalog. So kind of different situation too. We currently have Atlan, and then we're trying to transition people from our current catalog into Atlan. So a little bit different where we're not mature yet, but we're working on the path to get there. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that's the one unique twist on this panel is, everyone starts, or most organizations are starting with something, right? I think I said that in whether it's the spreadsheets that we saw in the poll, or it's the 20% from the poll that said we have something that we're kind of disappointed in. We're already using something, or we've given up on data catalogs altogether. I think that's really excited to get that unique perspective. Dan, let me pass it over to you. Same question. What is the state of data governance at Porto right now? And, what have you and your team been working on?
Awesome. Thanks, Austin. So where we are at right now? Well, at Porto, this has been a transitional year. So we moved from a legacy catalog to Atlan at the beginning of the year, and we had a lot of work in terms of adapting into this new platform, training the users to the new platform. Some of them were used to the legacy platform. And we had also to move our processes into Atlan as well. And we are, once all of that was done, we are now able to pursue new horizons, let's say. So we are kind of expanding the data governance scope that we had from our analytical databases and environments into BI environments, so dashboards, Tableau, Power BI. We are working into solutions to look on our on-premises data as well, and at the same time we're also kind of refining a few stuff regarding our processes, regarding sort of like the meta model we have built upon Atlas.
Yeah, it makes sense. Dan, I'll just kind of continue with you here, but when you're switching to a new tool, right? There's obviously we've invested in something, right? And tell us a little bit about maybe what made you make the switch, but more so from what are those signs that something isn't working, or we need something new, or what is kind of the big push that says we need to make a switch to a new technology? Is it just going through a new plan? Is it lack of adoption in the other tool? Just walk us through that. How do you even get to implementing something like a modern data catalog?
All right. Well, for us, it's hard to say, uh, to give like one specific reason, one big push that made us make the decision of switching over. I think it was a lot of small problems adding up until the point where eventually it got to the point where it was unsustainable to stay with the previous solution. And for us, that the journey was, well, at first we acquired the previous solution, we started working on it, we had a whole bunch of expectancies towards it, what we were going to be able to do, the features we were going to have at our disposal, and the results we wanted to achieve with that. And what happened was that over time, we started um, stumbling upon issues here and there. We weren't able to implement some features. We received feedback from our users, and it wasn't the best feedback in terms of user interface or the user experience with the solution. Um, and overall, these kind of issues over time, they kind of add up, and it came to a point where we felt like we weren't able to get to where we wanted to. And one of the main reasons was the solution we had at our disposal to use. In my perception, whatever tool or tools you choose, they're kind of going to be the cornerstone of whatever data governance framework we're going to implement. So we're going to need them, and they're going to help you to get whatever you want to be, to implement the strategy you have defined. And when you start feeling that the solution you have at our disposal is not being is not helping you to be where you want to be, and then you ask your vendor for help, and the support from your vendor is also not able to help you. So I think at the end of the day, that was what made us look for solutions elsewhere.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, there's kind of the objective, does it have the features that we need? But then there's also your data governance strategy changes probably incrementally, right? Throughout the year, annually, something like that. So you need something that can adapt as your strategy changes. Technology is an enabler, but I think it's more about where's the organization going with governance. Joe, similar question. I mean, what were some of the pain points that you were recognizing, or maybe gaps in a previous solution that make you go from kind of a legacy tool to, hey, how do we move into this modern data governance world?
Yeah, similar to Daniel too, when he was talking about like the interface, our previous tool, the feedback that we did get that it wasn't very user friendly. So people would only go into the tool when they absolutely needed to. So we were paying for this tool that not everyone was utilizing just because to train someone or to give someone access to it, it was not a very formal process. So when we started, we had just begun looking for a new solution. So I will say that since onboarding users, we've been getting great feedback from it. So one of the features that a lot of our users have said that they like are the help videos on Atlan. So they have like a big list of how do you query data? How do you search assets? So users really like that interface where our previous one didn't have those features. So
Was it were there particular personas? I think what I see in a lot of organizations that have legacy catalogs is like data engineers might use it for something, but the business doesn't know it exists, or vice versa, right? There's like a glossary that the business uses, but it's not connected to any of the physical assets. I mean, it was that either or a scenario, or which one, or
yeah, so our previous catalog, we didn't have personas. So every user could query any data. They could search any data, edit data. So with Atlan now, we can set the persona to only users can query. If you can't query, you can only query certain assets. So being able to really add that extra security feature in the data, being able to set those permissions and personas to the very specific users was a big plus that we saw when joining Atlan. So
awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to double click on usage, like who is using that, like who do you roll this out to first? But Natalie, similar question. I mean, HelloFresh going through, I'd say a data governance journey. What are some of the pain points that you recognize, and what was that tipping point of we should probably look at something else, or
Yeah, for us, the biggest pain point was to have a very good understanding of our data landscape, right? So as an organization, we grew our tech stack, so it became a lot more innovative. And to have a very good understanding of the data lineage from the operational all the way to your dashboard was something that was very important for us, right? So, but not only from the data lineage in terms from like the start to the end, but what happens if I'm a data producer that owns an asset and I make any changes, what's the impact on my downstream consumer, right? So having that view end to end was something that was very important that we didn't really have in our previous data catalog. And this was quite key for us. Of course, on top of what Joe and Dan said around the user, like the UI is very user friendly. But yeah, the data lineage for us was a big decision in terms of switching to Atlan.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's helpful. Just to, I guess, the big question would be, how do you actually start to move users to a tool, right? They've had something that they could use, and maybe I'm making assumptions that they knew about it, but like, how do you pick up where you left off, but also kind of course correct for, it's a new opportunity with a new solution. Natalie, maybe I'll just keep asking you, but what does that process look like? Do you just start from a blank canvas, or were you moving information? Were you trying to recreate things? And what did it look like at HelloFresh?
So it was a mix of both. A lot of some of the assets were kind of migrated, especially the key ones where we use certification in terms of understanding the quality of the assets, the trustworthiness of it. But we also really started from a blank sheet, right? So what were some of the pain points that our users had, around the data lineage? The collaboration was a big thing as well, right? How do I collaborate as a consumer and a producer? So having all of the different toolings like the Jira integration, the Slack integration. So I would say the transition was fairly smooth. We had quite a low adoption in our previous tool, so it was not like a very big migration. So from that perspective, that was good. But yeah, so really having that understanding from the user, what were the pain points, was quite key as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Dan, same kind of question, I guess. I know from your experience of what you're currently doing in Atlan, but maybe for the group, how did you approach going from work that you had put into another solution to now we need to provide users with a starting point that they're familiar with, but then expand? What does that look like going into Atlan?
Right. So for us, we have designed sort of a plan on how to move forward with that, and our main goal was to minimize the impact on our users. So we wanted to be as close as possible so that the users wouldn't feel any difference between the different solutions. And in order to do that, one of the requirements was, well, we have to move all of the metadata we have cataloged into this new solution. So the connectors have to work for all of our data sources. We can't have our users missing literacy and documentation that they had before, right? So well, that's the minimum requirement, and we worked towards that. And also we had a plan on communication. So we sent emails, company-wide emails to the users, kind of like to prepare them for what was to come. So when we first signed the contract with Atlan, we sent an email saying, hey, a new data catalog is coming, a new solution is coming. It's gonna have more features, it's gonna have a better user interface, so it's gonna help you better to do your job, it's gonna help you better with data discovery and contextualization. And as we progressed, we would notify our users, communicate them. We invited them to a few of them, the heavier data users we have. We invited them to test uh, what we were doing before doing the rollout to everyone, and we got feedback from them, and we were able to kind of correct our journey, our path, so that when we did the rollout, we had already fixed it. We had already heard our users beforehand, kind of like in a mentality of fail fast, so we wanted to fail fast and improve as fast as possible so that the rollout would be as smooth as possible. And at the end of the day, I think that strategy paid off. We have been 5 months now since the rollout. The user feedback is super positive. User adoption went up. We more than doubled, almost tripled our base users from our previous catalog to Outrun. So that was basically how it went for us.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think like success metrics is something that keeps coming up in the chat and the question too. I think we'll get to that. Joe, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk on that point too. But yeah, so I guess what did you use it as blank canvas? We have a new technology, or was it, hey, let's take some of the work that we've done in this legacy solution and try to recreate it in Atlan? Or what was DigiKey's approach?
Yeah, so similar to what Dan said too. So we did the kind of like the announcement. So we sent an email, kind of like broadcasting like, hey, we got this new data catalog tool. The heavy users of the previous system would be the first ones that we notify, kind of get them onboarded. And then once they were onboarded, we did a follow-up with them, kind of like, what's missing? What do you like? What did the previous system have that you would like to see in Atlan? And 9 times out of 10, Atlan already had it. So it was just for us to discover and maybe turn on something that were in the settings. I think getting the buy-in, since we still have our other tool, that is still our biggest probably hang up right now. But we've been really pushing the deadline and getting in front of the problem before it starts, getting users signed in and into kind of like a high level overview, kind of like one-on-one training with them. So, but yeah, I think having all of like our connectors to the data in place first, that was one of our major kind of pinpoints to do before we start opening the door to any kind of user. So kind of really being meticulous and getting the heavy data users in there first, and then allowing people that are just more in there for data discovery. They're not as a priority right now for us. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I've heard a couple of things from everyone, which is there's an element of meet the user where they're comfortable, which, maybe Natalie, in your scenario, it sounds like we kind of had an opportunity to just start with Atlan, whereas Dan, you mentioned a lot of it was from a technical perspective, porting everything over into Atlan. So it looked like they had everything they knew they would expect was there from their previous tool. And Joe, it's kind of like a hybrid, right? There's certain users you're using as a champion to move the implementation forward. I'm gonna kind of piggyback off that with some of the questions that we have in the chat and in the Q&A. But what does that look like from a time perspective? From a technology standpoint, connecting to your existing assets. There's always a question about how much development effort does that take. I could speak to it on your behalf, but I'd love to hear from you. Dan, maybe I'll come back to you. We'll go Dan, Natalie, and then Joe. But what did that look like? Porting assets, connecting new systems together from a timing and effort perspective.
Well, in our case, it was it took us a surprisingly low effort. We really wasn't expecting, because from past experience, usually connecting to data sources are one of the heaviest holdups you have. But in case of Atlan, all we had to do was get a user to the data source, get a permissioned user, plug that user in the connector, and the connector will just like crawl the whole environment and bring the metadata, and then you run the miner, and then just brings the lineage as well. So it was one of the biggest surprises for us, actually. And the first time we got in contact with that was in the trial. So we had a trial before actually going into the partnership with Atlan. So this kind of helped us getting familiar to how Atlan worked, and it made the rollout easier for us. With that said, we took only 2 months to do the rollout. Since the tool acquisition until we were able to roll out with the users, it actually took 1 month of work to get the users and get the data sources cataloged.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to. I mean, time to value. We're going to get into metrics a little bit, but I think it's really helpful. Natalie, I guess same question. I mean, what does it take to get up and running, especially when you've already tried something else or have something else in-house?
So for us, we were, I would say, up and running within a few weeks, right? Once the POC was completed, really we were up and running within a few weeks. And in terms of engineering effort, it was very low. So it's very similar to what Dan was saying, right? It was really low key on that respect. So that was also a surprise, given that we already had a previous data catalog, and we would spend months just to get one thing connected. Whereas here, within the space of a couple of weeks, we had all of our major data sources already onboarded and onto the data catalog. So this was a pleasant surprise.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always good to hear. I guess being an Atlantean, it's always encouraging that pleasantly surprised or shorter timelines like that. Joe, I guess, and I think you're earlier in these stages, right? But I mean, how are you finding the transition from one to another in terms of getting the actual metadata into the catalog or utilizing this tool?
Yeah, similar to Natalie and Dan, I would say we had our major data sources connected probably like a couple weeks from like the end of the POC to the catalog being active. So and then another thing kind of like we're seeing too now, like with a lot of our other not data sources but data tools we are using, that Atlan has the interface to connect those as well. So we are using a couple other tools that we can embed in with Atlan too. So that was kind of a thing that we didn't see with their previous catalog. So being able to have multiple different tools connected to Atlan outside of just the data sources. So
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, maybe switching gears a little bit, just from a governance program in general, what are these metrics of success? We talked a little bit about adoption. Do you have numbers that you're tying to this or goals? Natalie, I can start with you. Like, what are these key metrics of success? I've seen this come up a couple of times in the chat. What does good look like? Natalie, I don't know if you want to start or.
Yeah, I can start. So for us, there was a couple of things. First, the adoption rate. So once we went live, the numbers of adoption, but also active users, right? So it's one thing to get access to the tool, but it's another thing to be an active users, right? So comparing that to the previous data catalog, within 3 weeks, we already doubled our adoption than what we had in 2 years with our previous data catalog. So adoption was one of them, but also the requirements coming from the different personas, right? So from the business, I want to understand what are the top metrics that we have today, who owns it, how well it's documented. But also from an engineering perspective, right? So what happens if I change a model within DBT? You know, what's the impact downstream? So having those kinds of requirements and at the speed that we can deliver those increase the adoption. So I would say it's a mix.
Dan, what about you? Metrics for success. I think adoption. I like Natalie. Like it's about active users, not just how many users, right? I think is the true measure of adoption. But Dan, a similar scenario, or I mean, anything that you've built out?
Yeah, definitely, I agree with Natalie. So I think user adoption is one of the metrics that can give you a feedback as to not only the adoption but the usage. So are the users that are logging in, the new added users, are they actually using the solution and getting extracting value from it, reducing their time to get contact or time to get access to data, or getting to see sample data, for instance. So measuring that for us is important, and one of the ways to do that is with user surveys to get feedback on their experience. So that's one way to see it, but we also look for metrics of success within our team. So how is Athlon helping us manage our environments, our analytical environments? In our case, we were able to reduce time spent on manual tasks, operational tasks, through the use of automations, through the use of Alton's API playbooks. We were able to reduce the time spent on manual tasks. We were able to improve our processes in general and management of the platform. There are also different use cases as well regarding lineage, as Natalie said. So impact analysis, root cause analysis, lineage helps engineers with that. We also identified a surge in interest in accessing data. So more queries being made in the analytical environments. That happened a little bit after the rollout of what we are calling the Datapedia, which is the data catalog we built within Athlon. We are trying to see if we can associate that surge in the data consumption within the rollout of Athlon. So those are all ways to measure success in my perception.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I love that it's Datapedia inside of Porto, and it's kind of the internal name, right? Very cool. So yeah, I think I'm hearing Joe. I guess I'll open it up to you, but I mean, I like this. There's kind of the objective: how many people use the tool, how many actively use the tool, and then Dan, you were getting at even more telemetry data, like what parts of the tool are they using? How can we see who searches for something, who queries something? And then I think extending it further is what you were touching on too. Like, how does this actually affect our operational time to value? Is root cause analysis actually speeding up our data delivery for the data team? Or yeah, I think that's great. Joe, how about you? What are kind of the metrics of success that you're forming when it comes to catalogs?
Yeah, so similar to both Dan and Natalie too, since we are not allowing all users to get in the Athlon tool yet, so we had our select, I think we had a couple hundred users that we sent out the tool to get invited to the tool. Yeah, and just seeing the number of active users rather than the invited users. So we are still seeing the active users increase daily. So more and more people that were invited are now actually going into the tool and utilizing it. So seeing those numbers go from the orange invited to the green active. That's another one of the big things that we see, that yes, users are actually going in and using it to either search assets or query data. So just seeing the more users in there, and then providing feedback too of kind of like what they like, and maybe some things are missing, but yeah, getting that active user count is how we are currently measuring success with Atlan. So
Makes sense. Yeah. Adoption's the name of the game, right? At the end of the day. Cool. I wanted to touch on, there was a question that we talked a lot about setting up the connectors, right? That crawl your databases, your BI tools, your operational databases, and that's one piece of it. But I think the larger push is probably, how do you match the technical metadata that can probably programmatically be crawled in an automated way with the business metadata? You know, how are you reaching out to these teams to either use, you know, Atlan AI, or add their own documentation, or add their own README files? Like, what does that relationship look like as you're rolling out a new solution? Joe, I can keep it rolling with you if you want to start, and then we'll go Dan and Natalie.
yeah, so right now in our data governance journey, with our previous tool, metadata was not captured at a very high level. So we are in the data governance roadmap of identifying who should be making the updates to like our table and column names, adding in like just not personal notes, but like notes about like either the asset or identifying like owners. So we're very, very new to the metadata game, I would say, but we are reaching that point now where we're starting to ingest, reach out to the business users who are kind of like the stewards of that asset, and really starting to get down to identifying and writing out descriptions. So I'm assuming Daniel and Natalie are more mature in that space. So I'm interested to see how what they answer. So
Yeah. Natalie, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so for us, one of the things that we wanted to do with Atlan in like the early stage was to really connect the business terms of the metrics with the underlying data assets, right? So initially we were very focused on data engineers, but a lot of the time we get questions from the business like, what's the most important metrics that exist out there? How is that put together? What's the calculation? So one of the initiative and project that we did in the last couple of months was to really focus on the top 10, 20 key metrics, and really have the end-to-end view of what are the underlying data assets that makes up that metric, so that makes up those business terms, right? And one of the things that we discovered is there is always a disconnect between what the business understands versus what's actually technically implemented, right? So really bringing the two areas together was quite key for us to have that end-to-end view from the technical all the way to the metrics piece. And that's how you drive value, right? So to bring all of the different personas into the conversations.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the very beginning of regovern. Prakul was talking about trust, and we were talking about trust in the first presentation too. But I mean, I think a first stage of trust is transparency, right? You need to be able to see how the business defines something, and then you also need to be able to see in the same exact place how it's calculated. What is the actual query? What are the, you know, the formula, if you will, behind the calculation? I think having those disjointed just lengthens that time to value or time to resolution when something breaks, or, you know, someone shows up to a meeting with three different numbers for the same supposed metric. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Dan, how about you? How are you connecting the business side of things with the technical metadata?
Right. So at Porto already had the concept of data ownership and data stewards, and so there was a certain maturity already in place in terms of cataloging business terms, defining business terms, metrics, calculations, and linking them with the underlying data. But Atlan helps us actually helps us increase, be better, be faster on that link through the use of personas, which allows us to personally define the permissions for each area, each business domain, and the glossaries that they are going to be able to edit, and they can edit um, in a very easier manner. Than they don't have to request access, for instance, or they don't have to document it in an own environment. It's a collaborative environment, so everyone has access to Aspen. So they have the permission to edit and to enrich their own glossary. Personas help us with that, and we can also do the link with the underlying data asset, which is also in the catalog and is also documented. Um, so that's how we've been doing that link basically.
Awesome. This is really helpful. Let's talk about we'll get away from tech for one question here. Talk about just the team culture element. I mean, a big piece of modern ways of governing data, I think, is just being flexible, being adaptive, and bringing probably more stakeholders into the conversation. But Natalie, I'll start with you. I mean, how has your organization's culture mindset changed to support a modern data cataloging solution, modern data governance? You and I had talked last week, and I love that you said, my team always kind of understood the need for it. It was, how do we get the rest of the organization to get on board with this? So I'm curious what insights you could share.
Yeah, sure. So initially, we had quite a bit of resistance because we had actually had two previous data catalog before moving to Atlan. So a lot of the initial thought is, okay, here we go with another data catalog, which I might never use. But one of the things that we've done during our POC was to engage with different personas across different data domains team, right? To really understand the use cases, the pain points, in order to bring that into the POC. And this started to excite quite a lot of people, right? And that facilitates a lot of the choice for us to go with Atlan compared to, for example, other data catalog where we've done also a POC for. So really, I would say really understanding the different pain points of the different personas, because the data engineer will have different problems than, what the business is looking for. So it took, I would say it was a challenge initially, but the amount of like presentations that we went through, the different engagement team that we brought into the POC really got team excited. And we used to get quite a lot of Slack messages saying, when can I use Atlan? Or some people were already seeing the value of Atlan during the POC itself. And this is where we started seeing a different culture shift. And one of the good thing is people started to realize that not only data management and data governance, but this was the right thing to do when it comes to managing the life cycle of data, right? So people started seeing our team as, enablers rather than, okay, here we go with the data governance team. And this was the shift, right? So yes.
Yeah, the data governance team is there to help and enable, not slow you down, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Dan, what about you? I mean, was there a cultural shift, or how do you balance that when you're implementing a new solution, especially if you're saying it's a data catalog, and then like Natalie said, well, we've had a data catalog. I know Datapedia, I think, sounds like the new way to brand it, right?
Yeah, it's how we've branded internally. Um, but in our case, basically, we had um, a sort of a discontent already with the previous tool, and that was one of the catalysts that drove us into looking for a new solution. But in parallel to that, there was also a shift in Porto in general in terms of strategy. So we were back then last year, we were moving from a more centralized data governance model to a federated model where the data domains would have more autonomy and into within the data that they had ownership on, and we needed to adapt. So in order to adapt to that, we wanted a solution that would allow um, for this new strategy of being federated, and that would also allow for collaboration. Would be a collaborative solution, and that was one of the key features we were looking for when we looked when we looked on for new solutions. And also throughout the journey, we invited users to try Atlan during the POC. We invited users after we had already finished the partnership, and the feedback from the users was positive as well. So all those factors together made us make this decision.
Yeah, definitely a common thread with like getting as many types of users involved in the conversation makes it easier downstream. Joe, what about you? Is there a culture change happening at DigiKey? Is it ongoing? What are you hoping to achieve in the next 6 months with Atlan or just data governance in general?
Yeah, so the data governance at DigiKey is still a very new and hot topic. Everyone has a different definition of governance, so just getting everyone on the same page of what exactly data governance is, and really driving in that we are here to help them, not make their work more difficult. So we could, for users that we're querying with our other tools, we have a licensing cap. So really kind of pushing, saying, hey, whatever you would be doing in a different tool, we can bring that all into Atlan. And just being able to, a lot of the features in Atlan are very helpful with the users themselves. If you're querying, they have a built-in query troubleshooting. So you can see exactly in your query where you did something wrong. So I think users are seeing those little things that some people might not see, like they're really actually grasping towards those and saying, oh, like this is a tool that our previous one didn't even have, or there's other features in there that we didn't know we could have access to, type thing. So I think Atlan, the tool itself, is definitely helping more users want to get involved. We've seen more requests from other team members that weren't in on that initial push. So the feedback that we are hearing is users are really liking the interface, and more so the features that it has as well. So
it's a good problem to have. Good news travels fast, right?
yeah. Yep.
It's always good. Yeah. Well, I know we're getting close to time. We'll just do one last kind of round robin, very simple question, and there's no one better to answer this than you all on the call. But we always get asked, okay, so what is the difference? If I look at data catalogs in the space right now, like there's so many different types and styles. So we're obviously trying to push this whole active metadata platform, but what would you say Atlan did this, and that is why it just was different to a traditional solution, right? Like, what are the results that you're getting out of Atlan so far? Natalie, I'll start with you. How do you answer that question? What is the difference between a legacy tool and something like Atlan?
So like I mentioned at the beginning, for us, the main big thing was the data lineage, right? But not from like a high level, but all the way to the column details. And one of the things that we saw during the POC is we had more than 10, if not 15 different ways of calling a customer name, right? So we realized that the way we were standardizing even columns was completely different from team to team. But the data lineage was one of the biggest winner compared to the other data catalog we saw even during our POC, right? But again, I guess requirements just differ. For us, the data lineage was the most important. just to have that understanding of where's the first point of entry of the data, all the way down to which dashboard it's being used, and just having the right owner and the right understanding of the description was quite key for us. So I would say this is one of the biggest differentiator. I mean, there's a lot more, but yeah, this was a key thing for us.
No, that's great. That's really helpful. Joe, do you have I mean, if you get the question, what is the difference between a legacy catalog and a modern data catalog like Atlan? I mean, what have you seen so far? Just how people are using it or experiencing?
Yeah, being similar to what Natalie said too, like being able to see that lineage from all the way down to like the source level. I know a lot of our engineers really like being able to see like that feature. And then similar to what I kind of opened up with too, to just having like being able to edit the metadata in the catalog, and just like the help features. You can talk to support, or like I previously said too, like they have like I guess Atlan University, where you can see like all the help videos and kind of like a high level overview for new users to get like a more in-depth kind of experience for the maybe some of the users that haven't had or even worked in any kind of a catalog before. So
Awesome. Dan, saving the best for last here. What would you say the difference is between legacy tools and Atlan? What's the big differentiator?
Well, yeah, what made Atlan distinct from the other solutions we have evaluated, in my perspective, is the care for the end user. The way that the interface is designed, the way that is intuitive for the user to discover the assets, get context from them, access the description, the way we are able to custom the metadata in order to provide the users the visual that they have to see. So the badge feature, for instance, super awesome feature. But not only for the end users, for us that are behind the scenes managing the solution, it's very easy for us to manage the personas, to manage the platforms, manage the connectors, set the connectors, run the connectors. Is very easy as well using the API. So all this kind of practicity for me kind of placed Atlan ahead of the competition, even though other solutions in the market have many features. They deliver a lot as well, but this was kind of a differentiator for me. And if I am to compare with the past vendor, Atlan was gonna kind of skyrocket. So we're gonna have put all the other features Natalie and Joseph added as well. So we're gonna have lineage, we're gonna have playbooks, sample data. So many more connectors that we have at our disposal. So all of those will eventually, in my perspective, work in being a positive for us as a solution.
That's great. Yeah. I think if I could just summarize the whole session, data governance is hard. And switching from one tool to another one is yet another people and process challenge, not just technology. And so I think if there's anything I've learned in this session, it's like make it as easy as possible. lower the amount of barriers or chances that end users could have to say, I can't use this tool or I don't want to use this tool. And I think it makes the data governance leader's life a lot easier, right? But I really appreciate the time. I think we're up on time right now, but thank you so much.